Today my guest is Charlene Quint Kalebic.
He came in and liberated them, and he showed them that there are good men out there that use their strength to defend and to protect versus to oppress and destroy.
Sit on, share the gospel clear and strong. Stand for, claim your heritage of truth.
Welcome to Heritage of Truth. Today my guest is Charlene Quint Kalebic. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's right.
Thank you for having me.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad that you were able to join us. She has a book which is called Angels of Ebermannstadt. Did I get it right?
Absolutely.
Okay. The journey of an honored soldier, a daughter, and life's greatest lessons of faith and friendship. Now, this book is really mostly about your dad, isn't it?
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It's a wonderful story about the man of faith that he was.
Mm-hmm. Now, he was a soldier in World War II,
Indeed, an infantryman.
an infantryman, and he helped capture the Remagen Bridge. Is that correct?
He did. That was one of the
Yes.
battles he was in. Yes, the bridge at
Wow.
Remagen and the Battle of the Bulge, and
Mhm.
D-Day.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, and you said in your book that he didn't talk a whole lot about the war when you were growing up, and even your mom hadn't heard much about it.
No. Like most World War II soldiers, I think it was just too painful, and most of
Mhm.
them didn't talk about the war and just wanted to put that behind them and go forward with their lives in peace.
Hmm. But you had a desire to find out more about what made your dad the way he was.
I did.
Yeah.
As I looked back on my life, those were very formative years, say 17 to 23, 24, and I just wanted to see what had happened during those years that made him the man that I knew.
Mhm.
And I thought, those are years that transform people, and so I
Mhm.
wanted to look back on those years.
And so you planned a trip with your dad. Was this for the anniversary of D-Day?
It was
Yes.
the 60th anniversary of D-Day, and the Department of Defense had a number of ceremonies planned, as well as the French government had a number of ceremonies planned, and they invited veterans and their families to come back. And
Mhm.
so I just asked my dad if he wanted to go to the other side of the pond in the hopes that perhaps some of these stories would come out, and
Mhm.
indeed they did.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I liked about that, I believe it was the first trip, because we'll get to it, but you took two trips
We
with your
did.
dad over there. During the first trip, when you were trying to, I believe it was in Belgium? Or you were trying to get in to a thing he was supposed to be able to get to.
Right.
But you couldn't get in, and you couldn't get anybody to help you.
Right.
Tell us that story.
Oh, well, we had to have credentials from the Department of Defense to get in to see the President Bush was speaking and President Mitterrand was speaking, and so everywhere we went that they said that you could pick up the credentials. I had a Department of Defense letter, and they said, we don't know what you're talking about. So finally we got to the place where you had to have the security to get in to get the security badges, and I thought, well, that doesn't make much sense. You need a security badge to get into where the security badge is. So I just thought, well, this is, we have to get my dad in there. So I saw a number of officers walking up, and I just approached them and pleaded my case. And they came up and talked to my dad, and they saw his Bronze Star, and they saw his combat infantry badge, and saw that he took the bridge at Remagen, and they said, we need to do something with this guy. So they whisked him away, and he got badges and came back and got the rest of us.
I loved that story. Oh, that was so great. Also about the story with his hat, the hat that he wore, and how
yes.
people responded to that. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, he always wore a hat, and he had his little Bronze Star and his all this badges that they had on there. And so that hat got us into more places, the famous hat. And one time he actually, we went through security, and he took his hat off for security through an airport and left it there. And the plane was about to leave, and I thought, oh my goodness, we can't leave that hat back here. And so I ran back about a half a mile through an airport to get it. And so and the plane was waiting for us, and we had to scurry back on.
Yeah. Now, did they wait on purpose?
They did,
and because they found out what it was.
Well, right. Well, my dad was. They really treated him with such respect, and I was so grateful that everywhere we went, they treated the veterans with such respect.
And how old was he then?
He was 82.
82.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now then, there was a second trip. Now, the first trip was for that anniversary, and you went to a few places, but there were a couple places he really wanted to go, and you didn't realize how important they were.
I didn't.
And so then the next trip,
that's right,
you went there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, on the first trip, he pulled an address out of his wallet on where he had stayed when he was in Belgium.
Oh, and that's where the Belgium came in.
Right, and I didn't realize how important that was, and it was the address of the family that he had stayed with. Mm-hmm. And I said, Dad, is that something you've kept in your wallet for 60 years? And he gave me that, well, of course, type of answer. And I thought, wow, we need to go see these people, because time is running out here. So we went to see the people in Belgium that he had stayed with and their family, and we got to hear their stories of this is really a kind of a stories of acts of kindness that he had done as a young man, born out of his faith and just reaching across national lines, whether they were French or Belgium or German, it didn't matter. And to him it was about relationships. So we went back the second time and visited the people in Belgium and went and saw the people in Germany again at Ebermannstadt.
So tell us about the Angels of Ebermannstadt.
Well, the Angels, it started in 1945 when my dad's and the company that he was with liberated this little town in Germany called Ebermannstadt. And while he was there, he was an avid photographer, and he clicked a few pictures of around town, and one of which was these lovely girls. They're all dressed in white, and they were going, I think, to their first communion. And they were a little bit scared of soldiers at first, so he put a little white handkerchief on his head and danced around like a goofball that he was, and so they laughed, and so they weren't afraid anymore, and thus started this little friendship of befriending the soldiers and them befriending the townspeople. And so he has always called them, he's kept in touch with these young ladies, and so he's always called them his Angels of Ebermannstadt, because I think, when you've gone through a war like he did and saw all the horrific things in war, that these little girls in their white dresses and their white flowers in their hair reminded him of angels, and that there was pure and lovely and good things, and that's what he was fighting for.
In the middle of this horrible
In the
war.
midst of this horrible war. And I think likewise on the other side, he was an angel in a combat boots and fatigues, because he came in and liberated them, and he showed them that there are good men out there that use their strength to defend and to protect versus to oppress and destroy. And so they were each other's angels.
Well, some of the things that these men did was they gave up their gloves. Talk about that.
They did. One of the wonderful little gifts that we got from one of the now grown up, of course, angels, was handmade socks that she gave to my dad and I. And so I asked her the story behind the socks, and she said that when my dad was there, it was such a cold winter, and the children didn't have clothes or food, and so the soldiers would give them the gloves off their hands, and her mother would take the yarn from the gloves and make that into homemade sweaters for the children. And they also said that each one of the ladies remembered that they had their first piece of chocolate from him, and that the soldiers would give them the chocolate out of their rations because they hadn't any food. And when the Americans came in, they fed they fed the children, and so that they finally had some hot meals to have.
Mhm.
So
Well, what I thought was one of the most moving stories in your book was on that second trip when you couldn't understand why he wanted to go to this one little town that was way out of the way. I mean, that moved me, I think, more than anything else your dad did. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, this little town was had been behind the Iron Curtain for many years, and it was a place where he had been stationed. But the person that he needed to see while he was on this trip was when she was there, she was a young gal, and he stayed in her house. They were billeted in these houses, and her mother had asked my dad to look up her brother who had come to the United States, and she had handwritten his name and address and phone number, and he was in Chicago. And so my dad, when he got back to the other side, he was a Minnesota boy, but he called up this number just to let her brother know that they were safe and all was well. And he didn't believe him at first, so my dad hopped on a bus and went to his door and showed up and showed him the handwritten note that her mother had written in the handwriting, and so reported back that that he had found him, and so it was just a little gift that he wanted to give to her to say, mission accomplished.
Right.
The trust that your mother placed in me was not misplaced,
Right.
and I've completed my task. And he gave her this little crumpled up piece of paper that he had laminated, and he said, I had to laminate it a few years ago because it was falling apart. And she looked at that and she recognized her mother's handwriting, who had, of course, long since passed away, and she just, she just cried and she said, Danke. And it was just a sweet little moment that,
Very sweet. And you lost your dad when?
In 2008.
In 2008.
Mhm.
And that must have been really hard. He sounds like he was such a wonderful man.
He was a great cheerleader, and we had great adventures, and as you can tell from the book, and these were a couple of them. But at the same time, I was so thankful for having such a wonderful father.
Yes.
That the thankfulness in my heart kind of took over and crowded out the grief and the sorrow that is normal at that time. But I just thought, there's so many people that don't have a great father, and here I had a fantastic one, and I got to have all these years with him.
Yeah. Which, again, emphasizes the importance of a father
Indeed.
in a child's life.
It
So
can't be overestimated, the importance of a good father, and not only to the next generation, but to generations after that, because
it carries on, doesn't it?
We have influence far beyond the years that we live.
Yeah. Well, I really, really enjoyed your book. I really love stories about World War II anyway, because there was so much heroism, so much self-sacrifice. I mean,
Indeed.
They really were the great generation.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And so I hope people will enjoy reading your book. But you also have another ministry. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I launched this ministry as a business just about 6 months ago. It's called the Blessing Collection, and it really was born out of a desire to give friends and family really meaningful gifts at meaningful times in their lives, and so this really is a personalized blessing that celebrates the special events and special people that we have in our lives. It started off when two really good friends were getting married, and I thought, well, what can I get them that's not another toaster or another, sheets or towels or something, and I wanted to give them something that every couple needs, and that's a happy marriage. But I couldn't give them that. Only God gives us a happy marriage, but I wanted to ask God for the blessings of a happy marriage on this couple. And so I sat down one evening with a Bible in my left hand and my pen in my right hand, and I just asked the Spirit to guide and direct the pen, and wove wove into the blessing just all the wonderful things that you would want, the fruits of the Spirit, love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and understanding and goodness and righteousness and forgiveness and all those things that we need in a marriage, and wove in a little bit of Proverbs 31 that their children and grandchildren would rise and call them blessed, and put it in a frame, and then it took off from there. That was the first one. Then babies came, and we all the babies need a blessing, and of course new parents need a blessing, and went on from there. So.
Well, it sounds wonderful. So where can people find you online?
Well, my book website is www.charlenequintkalebic.com. That's CharleneQuintkalebic.com. And the Blessing Collection can be found at www.theblessingscollection.com. So,
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Charlene, for being our guest.
Thank you for having me. This has been delightful.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed you too.
Mm-hmm.
Stand